There we go. Welcome everyone that's just joining us now. I'll give a little bit of time for people to jump on as they come about. So thank you so much for taking the time out of your day to come and look at this. And for the people who are watching later, we have something very, very exciting in store for you. I would like to highlight that we are with our partner Blisspot today, who has brought forward a collection of their authors who are all wonderful in their own right and all experts on different areas of self-care, resilience, well-being, those sorts of things. And they all have lots and lots of things to bring to the table today. We'll be focusing on that self-care aspect as we join as part of Mental Health Month. Before we get into it, I would like to acknowledge the traditional owners on the land in which we gather. For me, that's Yagara and Turrbal people, and I really want to acknowledge the elders past, present and emerging. In particular for me, it's been the whole person approach that's been taught to me by local kind of elders and local experts, and the way in which they look at the whole of our connection to place, to country, and to each other when they talk about mental health to me. I think that's incredible, and I can't imagine having a perspective and feeling like a part of the country I am without their culture. Today in this webinar, however, we'll be looking at about 25 minutes or 30 minutes of active discussion. We'll be checking in with each of these experts in their particular areas, but we'll also be opening up to a bit of a conversational flow. And then throughout, please pipe up if you want to submit a question through chat, or if you want to shoot me through a question. I've also got my eye on a live chat from the Go One staff in the background, who will be shooting me through some questions as well, but there will be 5 minutes dedicated at the end to answer a couple of questions that don't quite fit in the flow. With that, I'm very excited to introduce the speakers, but I will always do it wrong, so I want them to introduce themselves. Could we start with you, Deborah?
Oh, thank you, Cam. Well, it's really delightful to be here. I am the founder and CEO of Blisspot. So I founded Blisspot 3 years ago, and the idea was to bring together a community of people that could really share ideas to make the world a better place. And that's sort of my passion. That's what I love to do. And I was very lucky to come across all these incredible experts from all around the world. Blisspot has, I think it's over 60 experts now, and each of them are very dedicated and are passionate about their work. It's probably, you know, their life's work, and then they're educators, successful people in their own right that share ideas with people. So we're very like-minded, and I think during these times, during the pandemic, people are looking for answers to how to improve their mental and emotional well-being, and that's what we're passionate about doing. Yeah.
Tracey, could you tell us a bit about yourself as well?
Yes, thanks, Cam. Well, I am trained as a clinical psychologist and also a schema therapist, which is a lovely model that looks at 18 negative patterns from the past. And since I've been working in this area, I've had a lot of other health professionals, other psychologists contact me for support. And what they're really seeking is just tweaking their own well-being. They don't necessarily come with clinical problems like depression, but they can recognize that they've got these patterns from the past. So we've been working on developing a more positively framed framework for well-being, and we've called that the well-being codes. So now we help people to activate optimism, more confidence, better connection, and things like that.
Wonderful. And I will say that today is not an all Australian panel. We have some wonderful international guests who got up very early to join in. Barry, could you introduce yourself for it?
Yes, hello, good morning, or good morning for me. Good, whatever time of day it is for you where you are. I'm a therapist, psychologist. My main area for many years was conflict resolution, relationships, as well, alongside running a clinical practice where I've worked with just about everything, in particular PTSD, that's post-traumatic stress disorder, and depression. I was very fortunate early in my career to have some great training, mostly in America actually. There was a lot of work being done in the field of positive psychology, solution-focused thinking and that type of thing, those types of approaches. And in later years, in all senses of the word, as you can see, I've decided that I really was traveling a lot. I just didn't want to do that. I wanted to put my accumulated knowledge out there, my understanding of things, because I am so frustrated by the way we deal and by the way we are ill-equipped in life to deal with the stuff that life throws at us so often. Hence today my topic is really, which I'm pushing a lot, is resilience, because it comes down to the basic foundational thinking skills and other aspects of our lives. That if we get those right, we will be more robust and we will deal with whatever unfortunate events, and we certainly need that now, come our way. So that's what I'm about, and I do whatever I can to put the information out there and share the message.
That's fantastic. And I think that's I've heard a lot of our clients and a lot of our people, and I'm very excited to see your course come live for them, talk about resilience. You know, it's a big buzzword at the moment, but I know it's tied a lot to the expertise of our last speaker here. Beatrix, could you talk a bit about that as well?
Yeah, so I'm basically starting with a personal note, because I think, you know, my topic is sleep, and my journey started with not sleeping really well and struggling with insomnia. So all the way back, well over 10 years ago now, I struggled with insomnia. And I think every topic we're going to talk about is linking together, you know, from resilience to all sorts of past behaviors. You know, every one of us will have this connection. And I think for me, sleep is the one, obviously, that ties in together all of these different areas, because when we don't sleep well, we can't function at our best, and we can't function at our best, we can't sleep well. So, and my area is really focusing on the lifestyle element. So I'm a coach, I'm a sleep coach, because it actually enables me to put in all those different tools and techniques to help the person to really optimize their sleep, therefore do their best to optimize their 24 hours. So that's really the short version of my story and why I got into what I do today, and really explore all these different avenues and different knowledge that we have to help us to be able to optimize sleep.
That's wonderful, and I think it's a really big topic at the moment in particular, because even though we have so much time at home now, I know that a lot of people are struggling with sleep, and a lot of people are struggling with that area in particular going forward. And I think for format outline for people today, I want to highlight that I'm going to dive into a bit with each of our experts so that we can share a bit of their knowledge, but I'm also going to be inviting them to do a bit of a roundtable discussion as well at certain points, so that they can add their area of expertise to it. So I think to kick that off, Tracey, I'd love, as a bit of the well-being focused person in the room, and someone who does a lot of clinical work here, when we talk about well-being and self-care at the moment, I'd love to know what are the main impacts that you see on people right now, particularly at work.
Yeah, sure. Okay, so one aspect of self-care is really about our relationship with the outside world. Like, to what degree do we have good boundaries with the demands of the outside world? And when that's really internally driven, like you make your decisions based on your energy levels and your emotional state, then you can genuinely practice self-care. So you can say, no, I'm only going to work X amount of hours per day because my body is telling me that that's the optimum amount of activity for me, right? But what I'm seeing a lot in my work at the moment is people are very influenced by the demands from the outside world. So, you know, more people are contacting other psychologists for help, for therapy. And a lot of the clients I'm working with who are psychologists are saying yes to all these demands from the outside world, because they believe that they must meet this certain high standard of performance, or they can't let other people down. So they're actually sacrificing their self-care because they don't know how to set these boundaries with the outside world. And then they're just activating more and more stress in their lives. Of course, that's impacting all areas: sleep, energy, mood, relationships, and things like that.
I see that so much at the moment with so many of the people I work with, and even at Go One, we've grown so quickly, and now we've gone through this period, and it feels like because you're at home all the time, you spend more time connected to work, and then there's all of this pressure for you to I guess put aside it, because you can spend more time on work, and that question of when you should is really interesting.
Yes. Yes. Yeah. Well, to that, I could say we've always got a to-do list. Everyone has got a to-do list, and it's never completed. So if you've got this internal dialogue in your head that says, you can't rest, you can't take an hour off because there's still X to do, Y to do, you know, the kids need this, or, you know, all these demands, then you're going to have a hard time creating that space for rest and self-care and giving yourself permission to do something enjoyable whilst there's still demands on that list.
I think, and that's a really interesting point to open up for, I'd love to open up discussion here between the four of you a bit around how, I know that separation between work and home life might be really important, and we hear that a lot, but how do we actually engage with that, and how does that, what are the steps to actually make that happen? Barry, I'd be really interested if you want to add in a little bit here, and then if the rest of you would like to jump on.
Well, uncharacteristically, I'm sitting here quietly listening, and that really resonates what Tracey said with me. And I think that my advice is always, whether it's in corporate training where I'm talking to groups of people about this type of issue of constant stuff coming at them, or whether it's with individuals, is start with what you control, start on the inside and work out. And that's the same, by the way, if you're working with a team, you know, make sure your relationships with each team member are functioning well and are resilient, and you can function well as a group. Never mind what the horizons say, never mind what the headlines say. Focus on the bits you can influence, and most easily we can influence ourselves. However, I would say that for most people, this is a strange country. They've never been there. And the recent events have, you know, I'm avoiding mentioning the L word and the P word, but these sorts of events that we've gone through or are going through are forcing people to be more in touch with themselves. And for many people, I think it's not an assumption to say it's an alien process. They're not used to it. So from our perspective as clinicians, I don't know if the others here agree with me, but those of us who work with other people, it's very, the first job is to introduce them to the idea of themselves and that they have an inner life and that it's okay to talk about that. So that's where I'm coming from, and that's where I think we start with what you can control, and the easiest thing to start with is yourself. But the hurdle is starting with what your values are, what drives you, what's important to you, and how do you manage yourself throughout the day. So for example, I say to everybody, take 5 breaks. Now, they throw up their hands in horror when I say that in corporations, but I'm talking about 2 to 3 minutes to tune in with yourself. And shut yourself in the toilet or the restroom if you have to, but get that time, because you know, we need to be more in tune with our natural rhythms.
I'm really
so
interested
that's
in
my take on that.
No, that's really interesting, and I guess from that side, how does that factor into some of the work that you see there, Beatrix? Do you see the same thing when you're working with people at the moment with the sleep coaching?
Absolutely, and I think one of the biggest things is, do we really know what taking a break means to us? You know, you hear all about what we should be doing. You know, some people love their meditation and other people love their walks. And, you know, we've all got a different definition of what that is. And one of the things that I've seen is suddenly our priorities have shifted. We weren't really sure what was maybe more important to do. In the UK, for example, at one point, people were rushing to get groceries because you didn't know if you're going to have stock. So suddenly the priority list, the personal priority list has shifted. You know, whether or not you have kids and, you know, maybe you had to homeschool them, you know, suddenly us as human beings, as individuals, had to deal with all these other priorities that we had thrown at us because we didn't have that normal pattern in life. So I think additional to what Barry said, and we've been discussing so far, is this is something that I've used over the last couple of months, is what is our top 3 personal priority, non-negotiable priority? Obviously with my clients, that's you've got to allocate enough sleep. Now what that enough sleep is for you, it's not 5 hours because then you're running on empty. But again, what are those other top 3 priorities that's going to help you to get through each and every 24 hours and be able to manage all the challenges you have? So you know, that's an exercise I do with my clients all the time. And that ties in with what Barry was saying about the internal conversation. We can't not figure that out, because otherwise we'll be running around, you know, dealing with everybody else's problem and getting sucked into all those different things that other people are demanding of us. And it's not easy. I know it's not easy, but it's developing that skill of being able to really prioritize those things that matter to us, so that we can actually be a better person, be a better communicator, be a better support to other people as well. So start with the top 3 personal priorities, and maybe just stick with the first one, just one step at a time, and just protect that maybe first or the second one. That's something that I found with my clients that have worked really well, because then you can divide all those other hours that you have with that in mind.
I've actually had a question shot through that you highlighted for me when we were preparing for this webinar, which was how much sleep do you actually need to function at your optimum?
So not to go into a long discussion about that bit, but every one of you will be individually different. Yes, we all get heard that an adult should be sleeping between 7 and 9 hours, but that's still a wide range. So what is it for you? And obviously within the sleep challenge that you guys have access to, you have the ability to be able to go through the process of figuring that out. But as a starter, a couple of things. Spending time in bed is often way longer than the actual hours of sleep. So the meaning of the bed changes. That means you're now suddenly looking at social media, or maybe looking at emails, or maybe doing all sorts of other, what I call entertainment element, but you're not sleeping. So that tends to change the meaning of the bed, which means that your body and your mind doesn't really know what it's supposed to do in bed. To figure out the number of hours, I would suggest first of all removing as many of those kind of distractions. Not easy, because that's when the brain goes crazy and starts thinking about all the problems, but it's possible over time. And also looking at, do you have to set your alarm for whatever time that is? Maybe allow yourself 20 minutes more. That can help you to figure that out.
That's actually a really interesting point when you're looking at the blurring, I guess, of the bed and sleep and the different lines that we have in life at the moment, because I'd love to open up a little bit of a discussion that I run into a lot at the moment, which is separating work and home, especially right now. You notice I'm recording right from my bedroom, and I have been for many months, because this is the only space I have to work. For you guys, when you're doing self-care and helping people through this, what are the little things, like concrete things that you would put to someone for helping to separate from, I guess, work and other areas at home now?
Well, at the risk of jumping too quickly, you know, I've been self-employed all my life, and my father was, and it turns out most of my ancestors were. So I think I have a head start. I love it. But I have done quite a lot of training for groups and individuals on working from home and making the transition. And I think this is a thing that we so often overlook. It is a transition. Change is, okay, today I'm working in the office, tomorrow I'm working at home. That's physical change, but the transition, adaptation to the psychological adaptation to those changed circumstances requires thinking about it and planning. And so one of the things I've always done personally is I go out in the morning and then I come back in, and from the time I come back in, I'm working, I'm in work mode. So now it's walking the dog. In the summer, it would be swimming and walking the dog or whatever. But even if I have to go out, get a coffee, get the paper, and then come to work, I find it much easier. It's good demarcation. And I haven't always had a nice home office and studio. You know, I've had to fit things in around others. So routines of that sort, and in particular, get breaks during the day. And again, you know, breaks where you prioritize different types of work through the day, because stuck at doing the same thing in front of a screen isn't conducive to good psychological functioning.
I think that's something I'd love to lead into. Deborah and Tracey, you were wanting to talk a bit about managing stress and general emotions and emotional mastery. And I would say, Deborah, you're not just the Blisspot person who's brought all these people together. You're actually quite accomplished in your own field as well. If you could, I'd love to lead in with if you could talk about emotional mastery, because I find that as a really interesting concept. What do you mean by that at the moment?
I forgot. I got so excited about talking about Blisspot and all the authors. I forgot to mention my own background. But just to give you a 2-second overview, I've got a background. I've started my own business when I was 24. So I've been a business owner all my life. I'm absolutely passionate about business. But I also love ongoing learning. So I'm a fully qualified kinesiologist. I've done psychology through HR and counselling. So I love, our inner world and how much we can learn and grow when we tap into it and understand and work with it. So my big passion is emotional mastery, because emotions can make us really unstable if we don't understand them, particularly when we're reactive. And then when we react, it has a physical impact on our body. So there are 3 stages of stress. So we can have a lot of control over our well-being by understanding our body, because as many people have mentioned here today, the body is the most incredible supercomputer you will ever find. It really wants you to be well and happy, and it's giving you signals all the time, but we need to tune in and listen to them. And often because we've been conditioned to think or cut off from our body, we don't hear those signals, and that's what leads to stress and overwhelm, and in the long term it can even lead to physical disease, because short-term stress is okay. Like if we lose our keys, we're in a bit of a panic, we might have a bit of cortisol and adrenaline going as we're trying to look for them. That's okay, because it sort of quickly passes. But if we're losing our keys regularly, that's sort of called stage 1 stress. If we're losing them regularly and we start to have panic attacks, that's kind of stage 2 stress. So that's probably telling us, if we're constantly having panic attacks, headaches, flus, if our body's sort of got those mid-range kind of disease things, we need to have a look and see what our body is telling us. And often it's related to an emotion. Our mind and our emotions are, intertwined completely. And then if we override those signals, because the body tells us when to sleep as well, and if we continue to override those signals, it can lead to stage 3 stress, and that can be like the autoimmune diseases, cancer, and more serious things and things that are harder to resolve. So by tuning into our emotions, and our emotions are here to tell us more about ourselves all the time. So they're a wonderful tool, and even the negative ones. So people don't have many problems with emotions like happiness and joy. We all love to experience those, and they flow through our body really, really easily. But it's the ones like anger and sadness and guilt and those things that often we don't want to feel them because they are uncomfortable, and it does take courage. But emotional mastery is about learning to observe those emotions. And then once we sort of, create that distance and we observe them, they start to flow through our body, because our body wants everything to flow, and for us to be in that state of peace and calm on a consistent basis. That's what it's trying to tell us to do, but we need to learn to listen to it. That's a very quick overview, and I do mention more about that in my course as well, because it's a big topic in itself. So yeah, that's just a slight introduction.
Oh, I think that's great, and I will highlight that a lot of this is covered in depth in all of the courses which are available on Blisspot or on Go One, or however you need them. Just reach out to us. We'll try and get them to you because they're so useful. And Tracey, when we were prepping for this, you highlighted something here in particular, which was being emotionally balanced in day-to-day life. And I'd love to hear that, especially if you have any insight in the context of the workplace, and feel free to chime in, anyone else as well. But Tracey, I'm really interested in that, because it's I guess for a lot of us, we're trying to maintain an outer shell of emotionally balanced. You never want to be seen as flying off the handle at work, or that person that's always up or down. Could you talk to that?
Yeah, sure. So just extending on what Deborah's just said about how comfortable you are with your emotions is going to obviously dictate how in tune you are with your own emotions. So if you have a story that emotions are bad, or vulnerability is bad, or it's weak to feel upset, or it's weak to feel angry, then you're actually going to be suppressing or doing your best to manage and cut off from those emotions. So the more comfortable you are with the idea that you're an emotional being, then the more welcoming you are of these emotions, the more connected you are to, you know, just your moment by moment emotions. So if you feel anger towards a colleague, for example, and you're comfortable with anger as an emotion, well, you're going to stop and pause and contemplate that for a bit and be curious about that, and not go into some big argument already in defensive mode. You're just going to be curious and say, oh, I wonder what that anger is about, or I wonder what this stress is about, or I wonder what this anxiety is about. So, you know, the more comfortable you are with emotions, the more comfortable you are with vulnerability, with uncertainty, then the more space you have to you know, get curious about what these emotions are trying to tell you. And you can do something useful. You know, your brain comes up with pretty useful solutions if you can just allow those emotions to come up. But you can't come up with very good solutions if all of your energy is going into suppressing and cutting off and denying those negative emotions.
Yeah, can I just add something to that, Tracey? Because I'm sure we could talk about this all day.
Yeah.
But with emotions, as you're saying, if you're comfortable with your emotions, you can have a choice around them. So rather than feeling angry and then just acting out and hurting somebody, or feeling disappointed and really taking that on and withdrawing, when you understand your emotions, and that's what emotional mastery is about, you're the master of your emotions, and then you have choice around your behaviors, and that impacts your relationships rather than those emotions driving you in ways that you may not like and would later regret. And that's about becoming more conscious and aware too.
Yeah, so self-validating is the first step, you know, to sort of validate your emotions, to say, well, of course I feel angry, or of course I'm going to feel upset, or of course I feel anxious. That actually expands you to allow you to process that at a deeper level. And, you know, to be honest, we learn that self-validating through having, you know, most people would learn it through having a validating parent growing up. And if we haven't had validation of our emotions growing up in our childhood, we have to learn as adults how to self-validate, because no one's coming along to do that for us now that we've reached adulthood. So we have to get good at validating how we feel.
Actually, I just picked up there that a lot of the qualities you're talking about might be something that they describe of a very resilient person at work. I know that if someone's able to take a moment and go, oh, why am I feeling like that right now, and process it. And I have a vivid memory for us where someone at a high level in a company we were working with changed their mind, which meant that, you know, thousands and thousands of dollars of work were down the drain in weeks of effort. And I was a little bit miffed, but the person I was working with went, oh, that sucks. No, I'm really annoyed about that. Oh, well, and moved on to replan. And I found that extraordinary. I'd really love to know, Barry, is there a big link between those, or am I just correlating something here?
No, I think that's I agree with everything that's been said so far, really. And I think my job in what I do is, because I'm very self-critical of my own work, is always to try and, is this practical? Can people use it? You know, it's fine talking about all this stuff, but how do you self-validate? How do you step outside? How do you say, oh, it sucks, when actually you're seething inside? And I think the magical step that we so often overlook is that thoughts and feelings are different activities. Thinking and feeling are different activities. You can feel ragingly furious and angry with somebody at work, but you can think, better not express this, and it might not be a good career move. You know, you can think something different. Now, we all do this all the time in our relationships. We feel something and we think and act, and consequently act in a different way. But to do it consciously, I think, as Tracey said, or to take a conscious step, to actually step back and think, okay, and maybe if it is a high, Deborah talked about emotional mastery, you know, maybe if it is, so it's more her area, but if it is a moment of high arousal where you really can't control your emotions, it won't just be now, it'll be in other areas of your life as well. Take some time, think about it and figure it out. And one of the simple steps I think that we often teach, or used to teach when I was doing a lot more anger management, is that can you name your emotions? Have you got what I call an emotional lexicon? You know, if you have an on-off switch and you're peaceable and loving, or you're furious, you haven't got any control. What are the incremental, what are the increments between one state and another state? And can you assess them, give them names, and then have an insight into controlling them? So separate the thoughts and feelings and learn about yourself and what your emotional landscape is, and start to tackle it that way, one piece at a time.
I found that when I was going through a bit of therapy myself, and for various things, I found it amazing that my therapist pulled out a book and went, it's not, I'm going to put it out to you that it's not good enough for you to just say, I'm feeling down today. Here is a list of 50 different words that could be down. Can you point to the exact one for us and start using terms like, are you feeling malaise today? Are you feeling completely downtrodden? What is the word that you would use to encapsulate best how you're going right now, and try and use those more? And
I think that's a very personal choice. I mean, if you're given the freedom to choose from that list of 50 words, the words that you feel comfortable with, that say something to you, rather than somebody, because we live in a culture, there's a lot of pop psychology about, and terms get thrown at us that we then tend to, so stress was when I was working with kids, they were all stressed, but that could be anything between homesick because they were in an institution and angry, so without that vocabulary, you can't describe your experience. If you can't describe your experience, you can't manage your experience, even if that description is only to yourself.
I think we're heading towards the last kind of 5 minutes or so now. So I've got one or two questions that have popped up, but and Barry, I really want to touch on a couple of them for you for resilience. But Beatrix, you highlighted something for me, and Tracey as well, before we get into that, which I really want to put forward at the moment, which is when the distractions are gone, what happens? I think, Beatrix, you talked about boredom and perspective a bit in your work. Could you elaborate on that for me?
Yes, absolutely. And I think, I think pretty much every one of us have experienced that when we climb into bed, we turned off the lights, and then some part of that emotional scale comes up, whether or not this is super exciting times because you have something, I don't know, major happen, let's say a wedding tomorrow, all the way to losing someone, and that grief, that experience of uncontrollable crying, and you experience that. That's normal in certain circumstances. But I think boredom is something that we don't really experience as much as maybe we used to. We always have, and again, we talked about that entertainment element in bed. We always have something to do. There is always something on our to-do list. There is always something, a next task to think about, the next project, the next interest we want to explore, the next hobby. You name all of that. Those are all those things that stop us experiencing boredom. And when we transition from a busy day, going through different tasks, going through different things that we need to do, we never experience that quiet moment. We never experience that processing time for our brain to go through, right, what did just happen to me? And that tends to come up in bed. So you turn off the lights, you climb into bed, and then what happens? And when I work with clients who are on the go all the time, and they always in this kind of state during the day, of course, your body and your mind doesn't know what the opposite of it is. And the opposite is what I normally look at, this boredom element or this quiet element. And I actually get my clients to go sit by themselves without entertainment, which means no phones, nothing, and just allow that time during the day and practice it. Because like we've mentioned, being in charge of our emotions, I think it's also a practice. The more we practice proactively, the more we'll be able to do it in that moment when the emotion is high. So taking that time to experience that fully quiet time, that means no distractions. This might sound really extreme. Often I get a pushback from clients, but when somebody struggles with insomnia and they might have been sleeping maybe for 5 hours, what is it going to take for you to go from there to being able to peacefully rest in bed and, you know, experiencing that boredom or, you know, that quiet time, the more you experience it within chunks of time in the day, the more your body and your mind is able to do it at night.
I think that leads perfectly into a question, and thank you for submitting this, Carol, or Caroline. I'm not sure what you prefer there, so apologies if I just butchered your name. But she said that this year has been a dumpster fire, and reading the news can be a bit overwhelming. How can we balance the desire to be informed of world events with the need to protect our own peace? I don't know if any of the panelists have something they'd like to add to that.
I'm happy to talk to that. So I guess I find with the news and external events, I'm really careful about what I listen to, and I monitor what I take in, particularly when COVID was at its height here in Australia. You know, you could easily want to look at the numbers every hour and see what was happening, but I just let myself do it for 5 minutes at the end of the day and be very careful about what world events you take in. We do need to know, but I don't listen to a lot of news all the time because, again, if we want to be the master of our mind, we need to feed it things that make us feel good and help us feel positive and optimistic, even if things are challenging and they're difficult. So I believe it's just balancing, keeping informed, but not really buying into that and not letting your mind mental loop or catastrophize, like taking it to the worst possible case. And also too, with news, just doubting it, because part of their job is to sensationalize and make it big and sell copies and get people engaged. So just taking it with a grain of salt while being informed, but then mastering your inner world, which has been a consistent theme here today, because I often refer to Viktor Frankl. So this is an incredibly extreme example, but he was a survivor of the Holocaust and he went on to be a successful psychiatrist into his 90s. And he, in that very terrible, terrible situation in a concentration camp, was able to find his inner peace and resilience. And that was by monitoring what comes into his world, what thoughts he thinks, monitoring his emotions and his behaviors. So I found that very inspiring. He wrote a beautiful book, Man's Search for Meaning. And I feel that in very extreme situations, if people can master our mind, we can too on a daily basis. It is possible for us.
I think that brings us to the last question that I've got at the moment, unfortunately, because we're running out of a little bit of time because we've jumped around a little bit. So this one, I think, goes straight to you, Barry, because I've been holding it a little bit. But it came through of, I feel like I'm not being able to build resilience at the moment. Do you have any tips for building or becoming more resilient as time goes on?
Yes, I do a lot. But I think that this hits on something which is prevalent. Probably we've all found this. People come to us when they're in the problem. And that's very often not the best time to be doing something about it. I mean, that's what pushes them to do something about it. But in terms of resilience, I say it's more about developing habits of lifestyle and the way you think, the way you behave, the things you do for yourself. But there are some kind of emergency procedures you can do. And I think everybody today has spoken about that. And that is living with the silence, stepping outside. You're outside stepping off the treadmill, so to speak, for a moment. And training yourself to do that, as Beatrix said, you know, if you've never lived with boredom, I used to say to my kids when they'd say, I'm bored, I'd say, great, get used to it. Because, you know, and until like 100 years ago, until the Industrial Revolution, we would have had boredom factored into our lives. We walked everywhere. You know, we sat in church every Sunday, whether we were religious or not. We had to listen to boring sermons, so I hear. You know, but we now live in a world that constantly stimulates us. I was in a roadside cafe a few years ago. I always remember there were 5 sources of information coming at me. Mm-hmm. You know, it's impossible to switch off. So I would say that protect yourself, and people, we've got something going for you, because what's happened during lockdown is that people have said they've started to notice things. And, you know, they've noticed the leaves on the trees. They've noticed the bird song. And this is really mindfulness in action. You know, pay attention to things that are close to you. Pay attention to your surroundings. Stop and study things. Breathe. Slow down. It's standard advice. You know, people come to me and say, what's the new stuff? I ran a course, one of my online courses recently. Somebody wrote to me and said, there's nothing new in here. I said, well, there isn't. Sorry, this is what every good book has been talking about since the dawn of time. And by good books, I mean the great religious ones, but books of philosophy as well. There is no mystery to this, but stop, know yourself, look at the detail around you, and get used to the idea of noticing your breathing and tuning into yourself. If you're stuck in a situation where resilience is, you're feeling overwhelmed, that's what I would recommend. And how you get there? Well, do one of the excellent courses via Blisspot or Co1, of course, there are plenty of those, but also give it time. You know, it won't be like 5 minutes. It'll be a routine practice. Just do it every day anyway, for a week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, and start small and get to know yourself and learn to tune in.
I think that's a wonderful throw there, Barry, to a little bit of a wrap up that we'll have to do now, unfortunately. And I will highlight that for all of October, Go1 is sponsoring access to these courses. If you need to do one of them, in particular, the 10-day sleep challenge is being highlighted by us because it's been available for a little while and we really want people to jump on. But each of the courses, the authors that you've talked to today, they all have courses. There are even more available at Blisspot as well. So if you're currently a Go1 subscriber or you want to check out Blisspot, please get in contact with us. We really want to get people on these courses and sharing them with as many people as possible. But I want to say thank you so much to all of you for joining today. And thank you for raising more awareness during October. We'll keep the voice going after October as always. But in particular, I want to say thank you, Barry. Thank you, Beatrix. Thank you, Tracey. And thank you, Deborah. In particular, Deborah, for bringing Blisspot into the fold here so that we can promote it to more people because it's just wonderful content. And lastly, thank you to all of the participants who've jumped on today and to the people who are watching this later. Please check it out because looking after yourself means that you can look after other people. It means that we can all thrive at the moment. And it is, as Caroline said, it's a little bit of a dumpster fire every year. So the more we can get through this together, the better. So thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you for having us.
Thank you, Cam. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you. Bye.